Get stealing, woo, wheeling, dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun. Yeah! Kurt Angle, yeah! Why, Triple H, you son of a tell me why! And Tony Khan, this is also on you!
I am going to ruin wrestling.
Just get over it!
What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky Gervais, right here on episode 8 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. They work their asses off to put food on the table. They work their asses off to give us a better life. So happy Father's Day to all you guys watching the WrestleHavoc podcast. Happy Father's Day, of course, to my own father as well. But we got a lot of things to talk about right here on the show. A lot of things to talk about, man. Jey Uso is no longer the World Heavyweight Champion. Jey Uso is no longer the World Heavyweight Champion. Not even a 3-month title reign. Jey Uso has had a lackluster world title reign. Heck, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it. Jey Uso had a failed world title run, and Gunther is the new champion. But we got the reason as to why Gunther won the World Heavyweight title this past Monday on Raw. We're also going to be talking about John Cena and CM Punk. The main event has been announced for WWE United Champions, which ironically is going to be taking place in Saudi Arabia. Why do I say ironically? Because, well, CM Punk has went on record and basically showed his disdain for not wanting to work Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago when he was away from wrestling. And now everybody's calling CM Punk a hypocrite for working Saudi Arabia. But you knew darn well, from the moment CM Punk came back to the WWE back in 2023, you knew he was going to be working Saudi Arabia. And heck, John Cena is playing into the story that, hey, I'm going to make CM Punk look like a hypocrite, even though he's going to go after my world title. Great storytelling by John Cena, but we're going to be talking about that right here on the show. The WWE Draft. Yes, the draft. Are you excited? No, I'm not. But the draft is actually taking place apparently after SummerSlam. So we're going to be talking about that as well. Mariah May has a brand new name. She is called Blake Monroe. AEW unveils a brand new championship, and it's called the United Championship. And it's going to be crowned at All In for the winner of Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada. Warner Brothers Discovery has split into two different companies. What does that mean for AEW in the future? All this and much more right here on the WrestleHavoc podcast. Before we get into all this craziness, please make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc channel right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the freaking referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, if you guys are watching the WrestleHavoc podcast on the WNN Facebook page or YouTube channel, I thank you guys so much for watching on the app as well. I thank you guys so much for watching everything on anything related to WNN. So the app, the YouTube channel, and of course the Facebook page as well. Oh my God, I'm getting my words mixed up. Dude, I spent a while preparing for this show because we had a lot to talk about, but man, we got a loaded show for you guys. Also, if you guys do not know, I have another channel up on YouTube that is WrestleHavoc Clips. All of the clips coming from this very podcast, the WrestleHavoc podcast, is uploaded on the WrestleHavoc Clips channel. So if you guys want to check out that channel, the link will be in the description below. But without any further ado, let's get straight into the wrestling talk, man. Let's get straight into the wrestling talk, and let's go straight to the action and talk about Jey Uso versus Gunther. If you guys don't know, Jey Uso versus Gunther took place this past Monday on Raw. And it was built up for a couple of weeks. Everybody knew that Jey Uso and Gunther were going to go at it once again, of course. Jey Uso beat Gunther at WrestleMania. And he beat Gunther by making Gunther tap out, which even then a lot of people were thinking, why did Jey Uso, of all people, make Gunther tap out? It's just very weird if you really think about it. But we had Jey Uso versus Gunther. And when we got to that match, Jey Uso only had 2 defenses of the World Heavyweight title. And those 2 defenses were against Seth Rollins, which ended in a DQ on a random episode of Raw. And the second was at Saturday night's main event against Logan Paul, which ended in shenanigans when John Cena tried to interfere. But Jey Uso ultimately ended up getting the win and retaining his title, or retained his title, I should say. And overall, man, so far, or up to that point, I should say, Jey Uso's title reign has been very lackluster in the eyes of a lot of fans. Very lackluster in the eyes of a lot of fans, and I do not blame them, because clearly WWE wanted the moment of Jey Uso winning the World Championship at WrestleMania, but they had no follow-up. But, of course, if you guys watched Raw this past Monday, Gunther is the new World Heavyweight Champion, and the finish to the match was actually very well done. Of course, it was a callback to what happened at WrestleMania, because if you guys don't know, of course, Jey Uso submitted Gunther. Jey Uso submitted Gunther by applying a sleeper, and Gunther actually tapped out. He did not pass out, he tapped out, which is very weird for Gunther standards, because Gunther's not the type of individual to tap out. You know, Gunther's the type of wrestler who's always, very dominant. But nah, Gunther tapped out in that WrestleMania match. And the finish to that match was actually very interesting, considering both men were basically reversing one another by applying sleepers. So like Jey Uso would apply a sleeper, then Gunther would apply a sleeper, and then Jey Uso would apply a sleeper, and it ultimately led to Gunther gaining the upper advantage and making Jey Uso pass out, which led to Gunther getting the win and winning back the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, a lot of fans took this as a major shock. And I'm going to go on to the limb and say this. I was shocked as well. I was shocked as well that Gunther won back the World Heavyweight title. I'm being realistic. I was shocked. Considering, think about, like, my estimation of Jey Uso's title reign, I expected Jey to at least hold the title all the way up to SummerSlam. That is at least what I expected. At least up to August, he would hold that world title. But no, WWE was like, I don't think Jey Uso's title reign has been working, so we're going to just have Jey Uso drop the title, and eventually he's going to, he's going to drop it to Gunther once again. Or not drop it to Gunther once again, but drop the title to Gunther, and he did that. So what are my thoughts on Jey Uso losing the World Heavyweight title? I'm going to be realistic right here and right now. And this is coming from somebody who advocated for Jey Uso to win the Royal Rumble and win the world title. Especially winning the Royal Rumble, because a lot of people hated the idea of Jey Uso winning the Royal Rumble but did not understand the logistics behind it. I still think Jey Uso winning the world title, or Jey Uso winning the Royal Rumble this past February, made total sense. If you look at the marketability behind Jey Uso, you understand why WWE got behind Jey Uso in the first place. Him going after Gunther made total sense as well. There was no way they were going to do Jey Uso versus Cody Rhodes. In a fan's head, maybe that would happen, but if you look at it from a realistic standpoint, it was just not going to happen, because clearly John Cena versus Cody Rhodes was the bigger match for WrestleMania. But when it comes to Jey Uso versus Gunther, the first few weeks of the build was not really that great. It was just promo segments. But then once Jimmy Uso got involved, that was when the build started to really, go up a notch. And then, of course, Jey Uso won the Royal Rumble. A lot of people hated it. I was one of the very few people that defended it. And clearly a lot of people did not understand why the WWE went behind Jey Uso to begin with. Fast forward to WrestleMania. One of my biggest complaints at WrestleMania was Jey Uso versus Gunther opened the show. Think about this. The Royal Rumble winner, The winner of the Royal Rumble is guaranteed a spot in the main event of WrestleMania. You don't just get a title match at WrestleMania. You are guaranteed a spot at WrestleMania. You are guaranteed a main event title match at WrestleMania. You are guaranteed to be in the main event of WrestleMania. Now, why do I use that particular terminology? Because that is exactly what Michael Cole told the viewer. That is exactly what Michael Cole said on commentary. Whoever wins the Royal Rumble wins the main event spot at WrestleMania. They will face the champion in the main event of WrestleMania. I'm one of those people that genuinely believes the main event is the last match. There's no such thing as three main events, 2 main events, or 4 main events. Maybe if you're building a card, that would make sense, but realistically, there's only one main event. There's only one main event, and that is the match that closes the show. Jey Uso and Gunther opened WrestleMania. Jey Uso and Gunther opened WrestleMania. It was not a bad match, but Jey Uso ultimately won the World Heavyweight title by making Gunther tap out. Now, him making Gunther tap out, I went on record and said it just, to me, that was my only gripe. Not just him opening the show, but him making Gunther tap out. To me, I didn't understand that mentality. Simply because, again, it's Gunther that we're talking about. Gunther's the type of guy that is very dominant, and he's going to lose his world title by tapping out. To me, it just doesn't make sense. And by Jey Uso, of all people, someone who's not necessarily a submission specialist. Let's be realistic with ourselves. Jey Uso is not a submission specialist. But if you look at it from a storyline perspective, in a way, it kind of does make sense. But Jey Uso wins the World Heavyweight title. It was a feel-good moment. Everybody was happy for Jey. I was happy for Jey because Jey has been in the WWE, at least on the main roster, since 2010. And for the majority of that time, he's been in a tag team with his brother Jimmy. Only to join the Bloodline back in 2021, have a great run, a phenomenal run as the tag team champions. Not to mention Jey Uso breaking out from the Bloodline and essentially being molded into his own. The Bloodline essentially elevated Jey Uso to main event status. The Jey Uso that you see right now is what came out of the whole Bloodline storyline. Now, I'm going to mention the Bloodline later. But Jey Uso wins the World Championship. Of course, he has a phenomenal emotional segment. Sami Zayn comes out. He makes his return. And when Sami Zayn comes out, and I mentioned Sami Zayn because one of the things that I predicted was we're eventually going to be getting a match between Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, probably for the World Heavyweight title. That right there, in and of itself, is a money match. Think about that. Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, both of those men have history together in the Bloodline. It just makes total sense. And of course, this was during the time when they were building up Seth Rollins' new group. They brought in Braun Breaker. And of course, when they did that celebration with, Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, clearly a part of me was thinking, oh my God, Sami Zayn is going to turn on Jey Uso. But that did not happen at all. It did not happen. Fast forward, we had, of course, Jey Uso's first title defense against Seth Rollins, and this was when Seth Rollins was just establishing his new faction. Of course, he joined Paul Heyman. Braun Breaker came in eventually. Bronson Reed came into the fray at Saturday night's main event. The match ultimately ended in a DQ. And then we had the Logan Paul match at Saturday night's main event, which ended with John Cena interfering in the match, but Jey Uso ultimately gained the upper advantage and retained his title. So that was 2 title defenses by Jey Uso that eventually ended with, I don't want to necessarily say screwy finishes, but they weren't necessarily clean finishes. And Jey Uso is the babyface. I think it's no coincidence. WWE just did not know what to do with Jey Uso after he won the world title. WWE just did not know what to do with Jey Uso. I think it's pretty obvious. Promotions always have a tendency to chase after the moment. Now, what do I mean chase after the moment? Well, there's a saying in wrestling, whenever you build somebody up, the money is not... the match is money. But realistically, the money is always in the chase. Because that's the story that people are invested in. And I'm going to be the first one to say this. I think people were invested in Jey Uso's rise to the World Championship. I think so. I clearly was. If you follow Jey Uso's career, you knew damn well that Jey Uso deserved it. You knew damn well Jey Uso deserved it. The money was always in the chase. But a lot of what these promotions always tend to get wrong is what happens after that said wrestler wins the world title. What do I mean by that? Whenever you book somebody or build somebody up to go after a world championship and eventually win that world championship, what do you do with them after? WWE always falls in this problem. AEW 100% always falls into this problem. A fairly recent example was Mariah May when she won the women's title. Of course, they built that story up with Mariah May going after Toni Storm. She beats Toni Storm at All In. Now, AEW knew their end goal. It was eventually going to be the return of Toni Storm, and Toni Storm was eventually going to get her belt back. But the entire title reign as a whole was kind of lackluster. Just kind of lackluster if you really think about it. Jey Uso is a very similar instance, if not a worse instance. Clearly, WWE just did not have anything for Jey Uso, unfortunately. Is he going to win the world title once again? I don't know. Maybe he will. But if you really want a clear indication as to how much Jey Uso's title reign failed, Jey Uso barely he has held on to the world heavyweight title for not even 3 months. He's held it for like almost 2.5 months. Now, if you really want to take things into perspective, you want to know how many days Jey Uso has held that world title? He's held that title for approximately 51 days. 51 days. That is not a long title reign, ladies and gentlemen. That is not a long title reign. Could you say that is Jey Uso being a transitional champion? I would call Jey Uso a transitional champion if, he won it very randomly, only to drop it maybe less than a month later. But Jey Uso has held on to that title for like 2 months. It was not a lengthy title reign. I wouldn't necessarily call him a transitional champion, but the proof is there. The proof is in the pudding. Jey Uso's title lasted roughly around 51 days, only to drop it back to Gunther. Did WWE really have faith in Jey Uso? I don't know. The fans, there's a large portion of fans that like Jey Uso, but there's another large portion of fans that just don't like Jey Uso. A lot of people, especially the fans on the internet, hated the idea that Jey Uso is champion. Why? Why did they think that? They thought that because, his matches are boring. All he does is do the hand wave and says yeet. That could very well be true. Maybe that's why. But at the same time, his character is over with the audience. He's a fairly popular act on WWE programming. But why did Gunther beat Jey Uso? Well, we got the reason, at least the alleged reason as to why. According to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, it's because Goldberg is making his return for his retirement match. And a quote by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, and I quote, Gunther beat Jey Uso to win the world title on the June 9th Raw show in Phoenix. It was confirmed to us the reason this happened is because Paul Levesque made the call to make Gunther versus Goldberg on the July 12th edition of Saturday Night's Main Event in a title match, likely since it was going to be the same day as All in Texas. Gunther versus Goldberg was always going to be the retirement match, and it was always going against All in Texas and on NBC, with the idea of maximizing that day with the big match not on Netflix but on free network television. That was a quote by Dave Meltzer. I know Dave Meltzer gets a lot of flack, but I'm not saying this as fact. Take Dave Meltzer's reporting as a grain of salt, because Dave Meltzer would get things right, but at the same time, he gets some things wrong. What are my thoughts on this? I feel like at this point, the cat's out of the bag. Gunther is going to face Goldberg, and that is going to be Goldberg's last match. We all knew for a while that WWE was planning on hosting Goldberg's last match. We just did not know when. WWE did not even announce officially that Goldberg is going to have his last match. It's just rumored right now, but it's most likely going to happen. I think right now it's set. All WWE needs to do is just make the announcement. Now, it's very weird that you would have Jey Uso drop the world title to Gunther, only for Gunther to defend his world title against a retiring Goldberg. Gunther versus Goldberg was always going to be the plan. I actually agree with that. I agree with Dave Meltzer on that. Goldberg versus Gunther was always going to be the plan. Always going to be the plan. I mean, if you really think about it, Goldberg and Gunther are very similar in the sense that they're the types of wrestlers that were always dominant. Of course, Goldberg with his streak back in '98, and of course Gunther's well over a year long title reign as the Intercontinental Champion. Both men are fairly similar because, of course, they were very dominant during their respective runs. But having Goldberg's last match to be a title match to me just doesn't seem right. And throughout the past couple of years, I've been very critical of Goldberg. And a large portion of that has to do not necessarily with Goldberg himself, but just the creative approach when it comes to Goldberg. Because back during the Vince McMahon days, when Vince McMahon was running WWE, and this was in the last couple of years of the Vince McMahon regime, you would say, per se, they would always have Saudi Arabia shows, and they still do have the Saudi Arabia shows. And of course, the Saudi government would pay WWE to bring these shows to Saudi Arabia, and it'd be twice a year, and it's still the case right now. But what WWE would do for those early Saudi Arabia shows, because nowadays, if you really think about it, nowadays the Saudi Arabia shows are just another WWE pay-per-view / PLE. That's essentially what it is now. But when the Saudi Arabia shows first started back in 2018, they were essentially glorified house shows. That's what they were. They were essentially glorified house shows. Like, they'd be canon, but at the same time, they wouldn't be canon to the main storylines that are happening on WWE programming. And most of the time, they were god-awful shows. God-awful shows. And the stigma that those Saudi Arabia shows had was WWE would essentially bring back a guy like Goldberg, thrust him immediately into the world title scene with no explanation whatsoever, and most likely have him win the world championship. Case in point, The Fiend back in 2020, and this was roughly before the pandemic. WWE built the story with The Fiend for months. They had him win the Universal title, and then they had Goldberg win the Universal title out of nowhere on a random Saudi Arabia show. Yeah, that's where WWE creative was at the time. They were in the dumps from a creative standpoint. But Goldberg always was in the world title scene without any explanation whatsoever, and in the eyes of a lot of fans, that was a bad thing. And I 100% agree. Why are you going to add somebody who's not even a part of the full-time roster being a part of the full-time main event scene? It just doesn't make any sense. This, in my opinion, does not make any sense when it comes to this being a world title match. This did not need to be a world title match. I would have much rather had WWE book maybe a feud between, or at least build towards, tease an eventual feud with Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, because to me, there's money in that. But WWE just didn't see that. Maybe they are going to head into a different direction when it comes to that. I have no idea. The Bloodline storyline is still going on with Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa. If you guys don't know, Jacob Fatu turned on Solo Sikoa at Money in the Bank. There's going to be a draft possibly coming up. Who's to say Jey Uso gets drafted to SmackDown and he's going to be inserted into the Bloodline storyline once again? Who knows? But Gunther versus Bill Goldberg being the retirement match, I have no issue with. My issue is the fact that this is going to be a world title match. That's my issue. My issue is the fact that this match is going to be a world title match. Goldberg's retirement does not need to involve the world championship. Oh, but Ricky, you sound like a hypocrite because John Cena is he's the current champion right now. Why can John Cena hold the title in his retirement tour, but Goldberg can't? First off, John Cena and Goldberg are completely different in status. Yes, both of them are big stars, but who is the more known wrestler? John Cena. Not to mention, John Cena's on the Mount Rushmore of WWE. Goldberg isn't. Of WWE. of WWE. I know a lot of fans are going to get that confused, and they're probably going to clip me and be like, oh, he was one of the best in WCW. No, Mount Rushmore of WWE, not WCW. Mount Rushmore of WWE. Gunther versus Goldberg does not need to be a world title match. It just does not. Now, with this match taking place at what's even more interesting is that this match is going to be taking place at Saturday night's main event. That's what's even more interesting. WWE's literally ramping up Saturday night's main event. Of course, it's happening on the same day as AEW's biggest show of the year, All In. Now, both shows are not going on head to head. AEW is still going head to head with WWE, but just it's not going head to head with Saturday night's main event. It's going to go head to head with Great American Bash, which honestly, in my opinion, which show are you going to watch? Are you going to watch the AEW pay-per-view, which is going to be taking place in a stadium, or are you going to watch Great American Bash? Come on, you're clearly going to watch All In. Imagine if both shows were gone head to head and you had the choice between watching a less than 5 minute Goldberg match and a full-on AEW pay-per-view in a stadium. Dude, I choose the AEW pay-per-view, even though you have to pay money for it. You know what I'm saying? It's I don't know, man. In my opinion, again, going back to Jey Uso, Jey Uso's run as the world champion has been a failure. It just has been a failure. Now, what's even more interesting is that Rikishi, yes, Jey Uso's father, Rikishi, went on the Off the Top Rope podcast, and he talked about his displeasure about Jey Uso and his world title run. And he stated that WWE should fire some writers over Jey Uso's creative direction. He stated this, and I quote, "I feel that those are writing for this kid, his storyline, you didn't do him justice. You didn't feed this champion the right talent to be able to continue to make this champion. Not a fair shot in my eyes. So you go 51 days. I say fire those that are writing for this kid here. You can't come up with something simple to promote and push your champion. That you, not me, you decide to put this kid in that position, and that's it. All of a sudden, the brains just went cloudy, like you can't write, you can't think of an angle for Jay. Well, if you can't do your job, I say best endeavors. Get the hell out of my way. Put somebody in that position, because the longer you keep the belt on this kid, we talk about what's good for the business, merchandise sales to the roof. That's what it is. Last I knew, if you can't make money for the company, why are you in that position?" Now, on one hand, it's Father's Day, and of course it's a father trying to stick up for his son, but some of his points are actually very justified. Jey Uso's merchandise sales have been through the roof. The sky, if you really think about it, I don't want to necessarily say puts asses in seats, but from a merchandise standpoint, he makes the money. So why would you have Jey Uso's run end fairly quickly? I have no idea. To me, again, it all boils down to WWE just not knowing what to do with Jey Uso, not coming up with very interesting storylines for Jey Uso. I mean, the Sami Zayn storyline was right there in front of them. They could have done something with Sami Zayn. Maybe they will later on in the year. I have no idea. But again, imagine a world title feud or world title match between Jey Uso and Sami Zayn. You do not think that is money? That is money 100%, and I feel like WWE just didn't capitalize on that. What was the point of the angle that happened? What was it? The night after WrestleMania? I believe so. What was the point of that angle? I don't know. But one thing is for sure, and that is Jey Uso is no longer the World Heavyweight Champion. His reign has ended after 51 days. Moving on. Of course, we got Night of Champions. Yes, Night of Champions is going to be taking place in Saudi Arabia. And the first match has officially been announced. Now, we already knew that the King of the Ring and the Queen of the Ring tournaments were taking place at Night of Champions. And we have the brackets, actually. I'm going to pull up the brackets right over here. But right now, essentially the brackets are 4 Fatal 4-Way matches, and then you head to the semifinals, and then you head to the finals. So, of course, in the men's King of the Ring tournament, on one side of the bracket, Sami Zayn won his respective 4-way match, and Randy Orton won his respective 4-way match. So we're going to be having Sami Zayn versus Randy Orton in the semifinals. Cody Rhodes has won his Fatal 4-Way match a couple nights ago on SmackDown. It was a match against Damian Priest, Andrade, and Shinsuke Nakamura. And the other side, the other Fatal 4-Way match that I believe is going to be taking place tomorrow night on Raw, it's going to be consisting of Sheamus, Rusev, Bronson Reed, and Jey Uso. Now, what's interesting about that Fatal 4-Way was that I believe this past Monday on Raw, WWE advertised a mystery man. And originally it was advertised as Sheamus, Rusev, and Bronson Reed versus a mystery opponent. And everybody was curious as to who that mystery opponent was going to be. And eventually, Adam Pearce went on social media and stated that that mystery opponent was going to be Jey Uso. And a lot of people were either disappointed or laughing because, I mean, they could have easily put either somebody else in that spot, but the fact that it was Jey Uso, to me, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, how do you advertise a mystery opponent only to announce it a couple of days later? Don't you want the surprise happening, on Raw? I don't know, but Jey Uso, I definitely see Jey Uso getting the win and advancing in the semifinals, and we're going to be getting Cody Rhodes versus Jey Uso in the semifinals. Now, who do I think is going to be in the finals of the King of the Ring tournament? It's very interesting. I don't see Randy Orton. Now, there's many storyline possibilities, actually. Many storyline possibilities when it comes to the 4 potential men that could easily be a part of the finals of the King of the Ring tournament. On one side, you got Sami Zayn and Randy Orton, right? You got one side, Sami Zayn versus Randy Orton. They could either go with the Randy Orton route, lead Randy Orton to the finals, and then on the other side of the bracket, they have Cody Rhodes beat whoever he's facing, and the finals could easily be Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton. The story is there. Of course, they have history together. They could easily do Cody Rhodes versus Sami Zayn, which is a fantastic match to begin with. I mean, I would love for that to happen. I mean, the possibilities are there. If Sami Zayn wins the King of the Ring, he could definitely go on and face Gunther for the World Heavyweight title at SummerSlam. Or if Cody Rhodes wins, he's definitely going to be facing John Cena at SummerSlam. But what's interesting is that if Jey Uso beats Cody Rhodes in the semifinals, per se, if he actually, even heads to the semifinals, we don't know yet, then they could do the finals of Sami Zayn versus Jey Uso. It's a very interesting matchup, a very interesting dynamic right over there. But that's your King of the Ring bracket. Now, in terms of the Queen of the Ring, as of right now, Roxanne Perez and Jade Cargill are on one side of the bracket. Alexa Bliss, and we do not know who's on the other side of the bracket in terms of the other side of the Queen of the Ring tournament. Tomorrow night on Raw, we got a 4-way match. We got Asuka, Stephanie Vaquer, Raquel Rodriguez, and Ivy Nile. I definitely assume Stephanie Vaquer is going to be going to the semifinals. It just makes total sense. And we're going to have to wait and see, man. But yeah, that's your Queen of the Ring tournament. But in terms of Night of Champions, we have John Cena versus CM Punk being announced for Night of Champions. Now, this match was heavily rumored to take place at SummerSlam. And me personally, I wanted this match to happen at SummerSlam. I don't know why they booked it for Saudi Arabia, but if you look at it from a storyline perspective, it actually does make sense. Of course, if you guys don't know why a lot of people, or I should say John Cena, is pointing to CM Punk as a hypocrite in this scenario, well, if you guys don't know, a couple of years ago, CM Punk on Twitter basically ran down The Miz for working Saudi Arabia and basically accused him of taking blood money. Fast forward a couple years later, CM Punk returns to wrestling. Then all of a sudden, a couple years later, he had a falling out with AEW, comes back to the WWE. You had to know right then and there CM Punk was eventually going to work a Saudi Arabia show. You just had to know. Not to mention, Saudi Arabia is paying them millions and millions and millions of dollars. Clearly, Saudi Arabia wants a big match for their show, and John Cena and CM Punk is that type of match. Again, I wanted this match to take place at SummerSlam. Who knows? It may still happen at SummerSlam, depending on the story that they go, depending on where the storyline goes. But to me, at first, I was a little disappointed when they first announced, of course, John Cena versus CM Punk at Night of Champions. But if you really think about it, John Cena's heel run so far has been kind of disappointing in the eyes of a lot of fans. And I've come to the realization that his whole heel run has been disappointing. But you have to be honest. the promos that John Cena cut on Raw and on SmackDown 100% were fantastic. They were fantastic promos. John Cena can essentially sell you on anything. But when you had John Cena face to face with CM Punk for the first time in how many years? Of course, this past Monday on Raw, John Cena had a nod. He had a nod when he said Saudi Arabia. And of course, a lot of people immediately pointed as, of course, CM Punk being a hypocrite for working Saudi Arabia. Now, what are my actual thoughts on, CM Punk working Saudi Arabia? Look, we all say things, and I'll be the first one to admit I'm guilty of tweeting some things towards CM Punk throughout the past couple of days when it comes to him being a hypocrite. But let's be real with ourselves. We all say things that we eventually regret. And I what goes around comes around. I'm that type of person. And when it comes to CM Punk, it's that case. Look, it is what it is. I mean, he's making millions of dollars, so I don't think he cares. But them incorporating the fact that CM Punk is a hypocrite for working Saudi Arabia into this storyline or into the build for this match, I mean, is fantastic stuff. If you guys want to hear a quote from John Cena that he stated last night on SmackDown, he stated this, and I quote, and this was fantastic work by John Cena: "I used CM Punk's sociopathic nature against him and backed him into a corner to the point where if CM Punk really wants to take his championship or my championship, then he has to admit that he is a hypocrite." It's great heel work by John Cena. Great heel work by John Cena. This is arguably right now the most important match that John Cena is going to be having in his retirement tour. 100%. It's John Cena's most important match because number one, CM Punk is one of John Cena's all-time rivals. If you want to have a list of a Mount Rushmore of John Cena rivals, you could put CM Punk there, Edge there, Randy Orton there, and maybe Triple H. But we'll think about it. But those three at least are on the Mount Rushmore. I can't really think of a fourth one at the top of my head. But when you think of John Cena rivals, you think of CM Punk, Edge, and essentially Triple H. But when it comes to this match, again, this is the most important match in terms of the John Cena retirement tour. Is CM Punk going to win the World Championship? No. He's not going to win the World Championship at this point. Do I think he will win the World Championship eventually? Yes, I think CM Punk will win the WWE Championship. When? I have no idea. That, at this point, remains up in the air. It remains up in the air. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. But when it comes to this match, John Cena 100% is going to be retaining. But that only begs the question, what do we do when we get to SummerSlam? Of course, we have the King of the Ring tournament. I would love to have a rematch between John Cena and CM Punk. That was literally the rumored match for SummerSlam. But now that we have the King of the Ring tournament, of course, the winner of the King of the Ring tournament will face the champion at SummerSlam, depending on what brand are they in. So, for example, if a guy like Sami Zayn won the King of the Ring, I'm just saying hypothetically, if a guy like Sami Zayn won the King of the Ring, he's going to face Gunther for the world title at WrestleMania. We could very well still get John Cena versus CM Punk at SummerSlam, but it's going to be in the form of a rematch. That is if a Raw guy wins the Money in the Bank. Now, essentially, CM Punk is a Raw guy. It's very weird. And we're going to talk about that later on in the show. The brand split is completely useless, but the brand split makes things even more confusing because they say whoever wins the King of the Ring tournament faces the champion of their respective brands. Meanwhile, everybody flip-flops all over the place. It's very weird. I mean, John Cena essentially is holding the SmackDown championship, and CM Punk is a Raw. It's a weird dynamic. But again, we could be seeing a scenario in which we could be seeing Cody Rhodes versus John Cena, and that could possibly be the night where John Cena turns babyface. I have no idea, but one thing is for sure, John Cena eventually is going to turn babyface as we head closer towards his last match in December. That is what we do know, because he's not gonna be a heel forever. This heel run is only temporary. It's not permanent. It's only temporary. It's not a permanent thing. But we're getting CM Punk versus John Cena at Night of Champions. I don't know what to think of that. On one hand, the promos that we saw on Raw and SmackDown were fantastic, and they sold you immediately on the matches, especially the promo on Friday. The back and forth with CM Punk. CM Punk essentially cooked John Cena, which was great. Also, we're going to be getting Ron Killings versus John Cena on SmackDown next week. But again, I would have wanted this match to happen at SummerSlam. And a large portion of that, and you guys are probably going to get mad at me for this, a large portion of that is because, of course, I'm planning on attending SummerSlam. So I really want to see that match in person. We may as well get it, but it all depends on who wins the King of the Ring. If Cody Rhodes wins the King of the Ring, which is a high possibility now that he's in the semifinals, I mean, the sky's the limit. We're probably going to be getting John Cena versus Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam. But, I mean, eventually, John Cena is going to drop the title back to Cody Rhodes. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But as of right now, John Cena versus CM Punk is the main event for Night of Champions. All right, moving on. We're going to be talking about the WWE Draft. The WWE Draft, that is still a thing? Yes, it is still a thing. Why is it still a thing? I have no idea. But we have a report, according to Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net. Per Bodyslam.net, the WWE Draft is currently scheduled to take place after SummerSlam, most likely as a tie-in to the season premiere episodes in September. So if you guys don't know, every September, WWE do these special episodes of Raw and SmackDown, and they dub them as the season premiere. I don't understand why they called them the season premiere, considering Raw and SmackDown are shows that happen 52 weeks a year. It makes no sense. Why are you doing a season premiere if essentially there's no off-season in wrestling? You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing as a season premiere in wrestling. But the WWE Draft is scheduled to take place after SummerSlam. Number one, and this is not even my main gripe. Number one, why is it taking place after SummerSlam? Shouldn't the draft happen after WrestleMania? I understand you got plans. You got storyline plans that you got to do. But like for the majority of the draft's history, it's essentially has taken place after WrestleMania. There's very few times where the draft would take place maybe in June, May, around there. But essentially, the draft would take place after WrestleMania. Of course, when WWE had their television deal with Fox, they started doing the draft in the fall, which made no sense. It just didn't make any sense. Why are you doing the draft after SummerSlam? Is it going to be a reset? Yeah, that's essentially what it is. But if you really think about it, WrestleMania is supposed to be the culmination of everything all the storylines that you've been telling. So the perfect reset should be after WrestleMania, not after SummerSlam. If anything, SummerSlam is kind of kicking off all of the plans that you have going forward for the next year's WrestleMania. You get my drift? Secondly, the draft itself. Why are we still doing the WWE Draft in 2025? And this is coming from somebody. I've been a fan since 2010. And 2010, they still had the brand split. Now, granted, the brand split was kind of in its dying years at that point. You know, they had essentially guys flip-flop from Raw and SmackDown, but they still had a brand split. I was a big advocate of the brand split back in the day. I really was. But I've essentially come to the realization that the brand split just does not mean anything. It does not mean anything. Why do I say the brand split does not mean anything? It means nothing because WWE wants you to think it means nothing. They constantly tell you on television that the brand split is useless. Now, they don't tell you outright that it's useless. Their actions show that it's useless. Why do I say that? Well, number one, the shows do not feel different at all. The show, Raw and SmackDown, if you really think about it, are exactly the same. It's just one show is better than the other. Raw is a much better show than SmackDown. I don't know what SmackDown is. I haven't watched SmackDown in the past couple of weeks. I only watch highlights of SmackDown. Why? Because the show is unbearable to watch. 3 hours is ridiculous. 3 hours of wrestling is ridiculous. And don't even get me started on AEW. For the past 2 weeks, we had 4-hour blocks of television for AEW. This week, we had 4 hours of programming this past Wednesday. But that is AEW. We're going to talk about the AEW later. We're talking about WWE right now. 3 hours of SmackDown is ridiculous. A 3-hour wrestling show just drags, especially if it's WWE. We've seen that with Raw constantly for years, for well over 10 years. Well over 10 years. SmackDown, as a show quality-wise, has dipped because of the 3-hour format. Originally, that was supposed to be a temporary thing up until now. The show was supposed to revert back to 2 hours, I believe, in the month of June. But of course, a report from last week stated that USA Network was happy that the show was 3 hours. And of course, they got a lot of money from that third hour. So we're going to keep it in 3 hours. So SmackDown for the remainder, or not for the remainder, but for the foreseeable future, is going to remain a 3-hour show. Yeah. Now, granted, if you're USA Network, of course you're happy, because what is on the USA Network? Nobody, let's be real with ourselves. Cable is cable is essentially dead. Everybody watches Netflix. Everybody streams. Okay, nobody watches cable. Nobody, not a lot of people watch cable. I'm sorry, but still, USA Network must be happy that they have at least a show that people watch, because almost, if you really think about it, if you go on the USA Network right now, 9 times out of 10, you will probably run into a rerun of Law & Order Special Victims Unit, which, by the way, I love Law & Order SVU. It's an amazing show. But still, you'll run into a rerun of Law & Order SVU. Essentially, that's what's on the USA Network. Either Law & Order SVU or 911. That's it. You just catch reruns of that. It's like MTV. If you still have cable, you go on MTV, all you watch are reruns of ridiculousness. That's what's essentially on MTV at the moment right now. The USA Network is the exact same thing. But SmackDown being 3 hours, ultimately killed the quality of the show. I only care about the main event segments. That's it. Not even the Bloodline stuff interests me. But why do I mention the 3-hour format, and why do I mention the brand split as a whole? The brand split is a dead concept. The brand split is a dead concept. And the reason why it is a dead concept is because WWE constantly tells you that it is a dead concept. They want you to care about the draft. Meanwhile, the shows are not different at all. Even back then, the shows didn't feel different at all. Maybe in the later half of 2016, the shows somewhat felt different, but they were still a WWE show. I could even make the argument that back in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, at least, during those 4 years, the real brand split was not Raw and SmackDown. The real brand split was WWE, or I should say the real brand split was Vince McMahon's WWE and Triple H's NXT. That was the real brand split back in the day. Why do I say that? Well, when it comes to Raw and SmackDown, do you see, if you really think about it, if you are a wrestling fan, there's no such thing as a fan of Raw or a fan of SmackDown. I'm a SmackDown fan. There's no such thing as that. And I know I'm going to sound like a hypocrite when it comes to the whole tribalism talk, but there's no tribalism when it comes to the two brands. You know what I'm saying? So there's no Raw team, there's no nobody cares. Nobody cares. There's no fans that chant SmackDown, SmackDown, SmackDown. There's no fans that chant Raw, Raw, Raw. Nobody chants that. If you are a fan of WWE, you watch both shows, end off. And WWE wants you to believe that these brands are going at it. No, it's a dead concept. The draft makes no sense. It just makes the brand split itself makes no sense. And we're going to be talking about the brand split when we talk about AEW, because there's a lot of talk about their new championship, which we will get into later. But the idea of the brand split in 2025 in WWE is useless. And it's useless because you have John Cena, who is the undisputed champion, which is the most important championship, but it's exclusive to SmackDown, showing up on Raw. You have CM Punk showing up on SmackDown and vice versa. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It causes confusion with the audience. I don't know who's on what show. Why? It's because everybody shows up back and forth. Oh, but you have general managers. Who cares if you have general managers? Like, dude, everybody flip-flops between the shows. Why are you doing a draft if you yourself are not taking the roster split seriously from a creative standpoint? If you really want me to care about the draft, do what you did back in 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. Because when WWE first did the roster split during those years, the shows were actually different. The draft actually meant something. Why? Because the talents that were on those respective shows had some sort of connection with that show. What do I mean by that? If you thought of SmackDown, you thought of guys like Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Kurt Angle. You essentially thought of the SmackDown 6. When you thought of Raw during the Ruthless Aggression era, you essentially thought of Evolution because they've been dominating the show for years. I can't think of somebody, like when I think of SmackDown nowadays, I just can't think of somebody. Oh, Cody Rhodes. Oh, yeah, but he's also on Raw as well. Or when you think of Raw, I think of Jey Uso when he's no, because sometimes Jey Uso would show up on SmackDown. You know what I'm saying, nowadays everybody just goes on whatever show they want to go, even though they're a part of that show. Not to mention, the format of the draft nowadays makes no sense. They try to make it like the NFL draft, and it just doesn't make any sense. They would have multiple rounds of draft picks. And then they would have, this is so stupid. They would literally draft they would draft somebody. Like, for example, if you were on the SmackDown roster and you were part of the first round of draft picks, they would essentially draft you to the same brand. So even though you are already a part of SmackDown, they draft you to SmackDown. That's just a waste of a draft pick from a creative standpoint. It just doesn't make any sense. And you're shackling yourself creatively. The brand split in 2025 is dead. It's dead. And it makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. And this is coming from somebody who's advocated for the brand split. You know, everybody talks about the creative struggles that AEW has. And some people on social media genuinely believe that a brand split would fix their problems. No, it would not. And I'll talk about that later on the show. But it would not fix their problems. WWE, even though they're at their peak right now for, when it comes to popularity, they still have some creative issues. But, a lot of that has to do with the draft. The draft just does not make any sense. But those are my thoughts on the WWE draft. Apparently, it's going to be taking place after SummerSlam. I could care less. It's just for a ratings grab. That is it. That's all it is. All right. We're going to be continuing on with the WrestleHavoc podcast. Before we get into all this craziness, please make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc channel right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the friggin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, I want to thank you guys if you guys are watching on any of the WNN platforms, whether that is the WNN YouTube channel, the WNN Facebook page, or on the WNN app. And also, if you guys haven't downloaded the WNN app, I urge you guys to download the WNN app on the App Store. But yeah, continuing on with the WrestleHavoc podcast, it is episode 8 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. It is Sunday, June 15th, 2025. Happy Father's Day, everybody. But continuing on with the show, we're going to be talking about Mariah May real quick. Mariah May, of course, made her debut with the WWE on NXT, and she has a new name. And her new name is going to be called Blake Monroe. Blake Monroe is going to be her new name. Now, there were some details behind her new name, according to Fightful. Fightful has learned that, at least internally, Mariah May's name is listed as Blake Monroe. Assuming this is real, it is not a swerve. That's what it is. Overall, look, I don't like the fact that WWE tends to change names for guys that are popular coming in from somewhere else. I just don't like the idea. And they don't do it for everybody. They do it for some people. Like they did it with Ricky Starks. They, instead of calling him Ricky Starks, they called him Ricky Saints. And they did the same thing with Mariah May. The reason why that they do it is because they want to own their own IP. And if you look at it from WWE's perspective, it actually protects their own interests. And if you look at it from their perspective, it actually does make sense. But on the other hand, to me, everybody knew her as Mariah May. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knew her as Mariah May. Now, if you guys did not watch the video package that they put on NXT this past Tuesday, it was a brilliant video package. It's essentially the Toni Storm character, but in a 60s setting, like in a 60s or 70s setting. But it was very well done. And I know a lot of people on social media are saying, oh, WWE copied Toni Storm. Look, the reason why Toni Storm is great is because Toni Storm is great. Mariah May is great because Mariah May is great. A lot of, Ric Flair, where do you think he got the Nature Boy gimmick? He got it from Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Ricky Starks, a lot of people compare him to The Rock, but he's still Ricky Starks. Mariah May is going to do phenomenal work, not only in NXT, but when eventually she gets called up to the main roster, which is probably going to be maybe in the next year or so, maybe earlier than that. I would assume earlier than that because WWE has been calling up a lot of people fairly quickly as of late. Stephanie Vecchera and Julia are prime examples of that. Ricky Starks is probably on the verge of getting called up as well. I still call him Ricky Starks. I know he's Ricky Saints. I know some of y'all in the comments are probably going to get mad at me. I still call him Ricky Starks because to me, he's Ricky Starks, just like Blake Monroe. And my light turned off, but who cares? Blake Monroe, to me, is still Mariah May because I knew her as Mariah May. Mariah May is going to do great things in the WWE. She's going to do phenomenal work in the WWE, and there's no doubt about it that she's going to be at the top of the NXT Women's division. She is guaranteed to win the NXT Women's title. Guaranteed. I said this last week on the show. She is guaranteed to win the NXT Women's title. That's it. But when it comes to Blake Monroe, it's not a bad name. I would have preferred them to do maybe Mariah Monroe. It makes more sense, Mariah Monroe, but they went with Blake Monroe. It is what it is. Of course, they're still calling her the Glamour. And if you really think about it, and I saw this on a comment section while I was watching the video package on YouTube, it's essentially WWE. I don't know if they intentionally did this or they didn't intentionally did this, but it's essentially them killing off the Mariah May character. Kind of, because if you think about it, AEW killed off the Mariah May character in the Hollywood Ending match at Revolution. So they're kind of canonizing that. And I don't know if it's intentional or non-intentional, but it's brilliant on WWE's end, regardless. But when it comes to Mariah May, she is now called Blake Monroe. Again, I would have much rather had her name still be Mariah May, but if you look at WWE's perspective, they want to own, they want to have ownership of the names because that's how that's how they've always operated. That's how they've always operated. Why do you think Adam Copeland in AEW is not using the name Edge? It's because WWE owns the trademark to the name Edge. So it's essentially the same thing. It is what it is. WWE, that's how they operate, and they've always operated like that. So it should be a shock it shouldn't be a shock to a lot of people. Moving on, Warner Brothers Discovery was in the news. And Warner Brothers Discovery, why are we talking about Warner Brothers Discovery? Well, we're talking about Warner Brothers Discovery because Warner Brothers Discovery is the television partner of All Elite Wrestling. On June 9th, 2025, Warner Brothers Discovery announced that they are planning to separate the company in a tax-free transaction, and I'm reading this from their press release, into two publicly traded companies, enabling each to maximize its potential. The streaming studios company will consist of Warner Brothers Television and Warner Brothers Motion Picture Group, DC Studios, HBO, and HBO Max, which, by the way, they're now changing the streaming service from Max back to its original name, HBO Max, which to me makes no sense. I don't know why they changed it from Max to begin with. Or I don't know why they changed it to Max to begin with. HBO, the name HBO has value. I don't know why they just changed it to Max. Clearly, the people at Warner Brothers Discovery are brain dead, but it is what it is. of course, as well as their legendary film and television libraries. Global Networks, which is the name of the other company, will include premier entertainment, sports, and news television brands around the world, including CNN, TNT Sports in the United States, and Discovery, top free-to-air channels across Europe, and digital products such as the profitable Discovery Plus streaming service and Bleacher Report, which, of course, BR or Bleacher Report Live was the old pay-per-view streaming home for AEW, but now they're on Max. Now, if you get their if you get the AEW pay-per-views, they have a deal with Amazon Prime, so you're able to buy their pay-per-views from there, or you can get their pay-per-views on payperview.com or on YouTube, which I get them on YouTube because that's just the best way for me to watch their pay-per-views. But a lot of people saw this news and they were talking about AEW because any story regarding Warner Brothers Discovery, it's doom and gloom for AEW. That's all these people care about. You know, a lot of people talk about the Enjoy All Wrestling crowd. And you know what I say about the Enjoy All Wrestling crowd? The Enjoy All Wrestling crowd The Enjoy All Wrestling crowd, the people that say, oh, Enjoy All Wrestling, are the real tribalistic fans. They are the ones that will constantly crap on you on social media if you disagree with what they say. That is the Enjoy All Wrestling crowd. And the same thing goes to the people that talk about the ratings. Because everybody talks about the ratings. Oh my God, what is Warner Brothers Discovery? What is Netflix? Oh my God, the rating is down. Ha ha ha. Wrestling fans always talk about the ratings. Meanwhile, wrestling fans have no knowledge whatsoever about how the television industry works. Wrestling fans are the dorkiest fans possible. They just are. And I'm saying this, and I'm a wrestling fan myself, but I ain't them. Okay? I actually got a brain. I ain't them. They do not know how the television business operates. And whenever a story with Warner Brothers Discovery comes out, they're always like, oh my God, this is bad news for AEW, ha ha ha. Oh my God, look at that, ha ha ha. It's the same thing with the people talk about the ratings. The same people that say that they don't care about the ratings will literally the next day tweet something about the ratings. So you do care about the ratings. So you lie to your audience. You do care about the ratings. You know what I'm saying? But everybody was talking about this. What does the Warner Brothers Discovery split mean for AEW? And I got a story and I got an update from Fightful Select. According to Fightful Select, on June 9th, Warner Brothers Discovery announced that they would be splitting the company in two, with one side focusing on the Companionist Studio Productions and streaming services headed by Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav, somebody who's been making very poor business decisions. That was my quote. While the other will focus on the company's global television networks and will be headed by CFO Gunnar Weinfels. Correct me if I'm wrong. In a quote by David Zaslav, he stated this, and I quote, "By operating as two distinct and optimized companies in the future, we are empowering these iconic brands with sharper focus and strategic flexibility they need to compete most effectively in today's evolving media landscape." Now, Fightful wrote, what does this mean for AEW? Sean Ross Sapp reached out to a spokesman from Warner Brothers Discovery who said that right now details are far and few in between, but that the split does not take effect until mid next year. So sources close to the situation reiterated that AEW has contracts in place. Obviously, of course, they're not stupid. And as of right now, there are no changes planned, and that AEW is still a big focus for Warner Brothers Discovery. As of now, they don't look to be any AEW changes associated with this, and are not at risk of a TV deal just evaporating. Why would wrestling fans think that? Oh, their TV deal is going to be evaporating. Oh my God, this is bad news. Dude, relax. Fans, are ridiculous. Now, they mentioned this, and there was a story coming out about the max numbers, and allegedly the max numbers are around 60 to 80,000 viewers on max. Nobody knows what the numbers on max are. I'm just going to call it a spade a spade. Nobody knows the exact numbers that AEW gets when they're on max. Because if you guys you guys should know. AEW right now, they're not only broadcast on TNT and TBS, they're also simulcast. So, for example, if you're watching Collision on TBS, they simulcast that exact live feed on Max, which is a smart move on AEW's end because the ratings, oh my God, look, I'm going to talk about the ratings. They have been going down, But them being on Max, is a good balance for AEW, and potentially, it's good for new viewers. But with nobody knows what the Max numbers are. Nobody knows what the Max numbers are. I don't know what the Max numbers are. And if anything, I could care less what the Max numbers are. All I care about is what I watch on television. That's it. That's all I care about. But to make it clear, according to Fightful Select, the 60 to 80K on Max quote was absolutely made up. So what are my thoughts on this? Who cares? Who cares? Why is this a story? Oh, because it could affect the view. What if they get canceled? What? Do you know how contracts work, bro? When their deal is up, then talk to me. When their deal is up, they're going to sign somewhere else. Look, I've always said this. The backbone of AEW's income is their television contract. And they recently signed an extension with Warner Brothers Discovery. That deal is going to last, I believe, around 3 years, and I believe there is an extra year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be getting my numbers wrong. In the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I am at the belief, in my opinion, that AEW actually has leverage. And when their deal is on the verge of possibly, not possibly, but when the deal is on the verge of expiring, they could either renegotiate with Warner Brothers Discovery or take their show and shop it around, because they have the leverage to shop their show around. Look at what AEW did. They signed a deal for here in the US on Amazon Prime to air their pay-per-views. Amazon Prime is a relatively large platform, ladies and gentlemen. There was rumors of a Fox deal possibly happening. Now, there hasn't been any reports of the Fox deal happening. Of course, if you guys don't know, there was an alleged show called Shockwave happening, but that was not going to be the case. That's not going to be the case anymore. And from what it looks like, there was a fault. The deal didn't just go. Now, I don't want to say the deal, but the negotiation talks kind of fell through. But when it comes to Warner Brothers Discovery and AEW and this WBD split, who cares? Bro, it's going to happen next year. It's at a talking point at the moment. We don't know what's going to happen. But AEW has secured their future for at least the next 3 to 4 years. They signed an extension with Warner Brothers Discovery last year. I don't know why fans... This is the problem with wrestling fans. They think they know about the ratings and they know about television. They know about the television industry, but they don't. They don't know anything about the television industry. They don't. They don't know anything about the television industry, because if you think about it, I guarantee you a lot of the people that work in these big television companies, they look at all of the discourse on social media. They look at the discourse on social media that wrestling fans make about the ratings, and they laugh in their face. I guarantee you they laugh in their face, and rightfully so, because wrestling fans are stupid. Wrestling fans are stupid. They have no basis whatsoever about their knowledge of the television. They don't know how television works. They think it's the 90s all over again. The reason why a lot of fans talk about the ratings is because they didn't experience the Monday Night Wars. I didn't experience the Monday Night Wars. But they want to experience the Monday Night Wars because they were constantly fed, all these documentaries about the Monday Night Wars. Like, WWE just doesn't shut up about it. Like, bro, I tend to move forward. WWE, when it comes to feeding you all this information about the Monday Night Wars, it's like they're going backwards. You know what I'm saying? But to me, I could care less. I just care about what's happening on the shows themselves. You know what I'm saying? And again, the people that say that they don't care about the ratings are the same people that constantly talk about the ratings and constantly talk smack about if a show is bad and it translates bad in the ratings. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a part of that group, because again, it's lame discourse. It's dumb. It's lame, and it's beneath me. And it should be beneath. If you're listening to this podcast, it should be beneath you as well. It just doesn't make any sense. But AEW is just fine, guys. They got creative issues, but that's just from the creative standpoint. You know what I'm saying? Like, dude, relax. Moving on. And this is going to be our last topic for the WrestleHavoc podcast. Again, it is June 15th, 2025. I thank you guys so much for joining me right here on the show. We're going to be talking about AEW. Yes, we're going to keep on going with the AEW talk. But AEW, if you guys don't know, has unveiled a brand new championship. Yes, AEW has unveiled a brand new championship, and it's for one of the matches that are going to be taking place at All In Texas. And before we get into that championship, real quick, a quick rundown of the card for All In Texas. We already have 3 matches announced, and of course, they announced this recent match last week. But the main event is going to be Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page for the AEW World Championship. And we're going to be talking briefly about that match because this new championship, if the reports are true and this title is going to be what I think it's going to be, a lot of people are probably going to be disappointed at the outcome of Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page. But of course, the main event is going to be Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page for the AEW World Championship. Of course, Hangman Page beat Will Ospreay in that fantastic main event at Double or Nothing. And he won the Owen Hart Cup tournament, and he's granted a world title shot against Jon Moxley. Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné for the AEW Women's World Championship. Match that is a huge match, but if you look at it from all of these perspectives, and if you look at it from the matches that are announced so far, even though it's a big match, I'm not really that excited about it because the build has been kind of lackluster as of recently. But we got Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné for the AEW Women's World title. Of course, we got here because Mercedes Moné won the women's side of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. And of course, last week they announced Kenny Omega. Yes, the best bout machine, Kenny Omega. The best wrestler on God's green earth. One of my favorite wrestlers. Versus the Rainmaker. The Rainmaker, Kazuchika Okada. And it's for both the AEW International, which is currently held by Kenny Omega, and the AEW Continental title that is currently being held by one Kazuchika Okada. Of course, they're going to unify both belts, and this new title is going to be called the AEW Unified Championship. What? You're telling me that you had the opportunity because you had an international title and you had a continental title, and you're gonna fuse them together. You're gonna merge both titles together. And it was right there, and you did not call this title the AEW Intercontinental Championship. You called it the AEW Unified Championship? Huh? Yeah. So this is their new title. If you guys are looking right here on the screen, if you guys are watching this show live, this is the new title. This is the AEW Unified Championship. Now, from first glance, if you guys don't know, I am a belt collector. I love collecting belts. I consider myself a belt enthusiast. I love championship belts. It's a great hobby of mine. I love collecting them. You know, my mom was like, "Why do you have so many belts?" And I'm like, "It's a collector's thing, okay?" I got the NWA title, I got the World title, I got the AEW title, I got the WWE title, I got the TNA title. Bro, I got a lot of belts. Now, from first glance, from a design standpoint, this belt is beautiful. AEW, in my opinion, AEW has better designs than the WWE. AEW has a more traditional, but at the same time, more good-looking designs for their titles. WWE takes the more lazy approach. Now, they've been getting better. They've been getting better when it comes to their belts, but it's still somewhat of the lazy approach when it comes to the WWE. But that's from a design standpoint. Now, from a name standpoint, the AEW Unified Championship. Now, I'm going to sit here and say this. Them unifying both the International Championship and the Continental Championship makes total sense. Why is that? It's because of the fact that having both an International and a Continental Championship on the same show just doesn't make any sense. Why do you have a title that is called the International title and another title that's called the Continental title? Why are they both simultaneously next to each other? Why do you have those titles on the same show? It just doesn't make any sense. Not to mention, the International title has gone through a slew of name changes. Because if you guys don't remember, when they unveiled the title back in 2022, it was originally called the AEW All-Atlantic Championship. They called it the All-Atlantic Championship. And then, of course, it's gotten into some confusion with even the commentators, because sometimes they would, by accident, call it the AEW Mid-Atlantic Championship, which is hilarious. But they eventually turned it into the AEW International Championship, which should have been the name all along. They've called it the International Championship, and it essentially became their prime, it essentially became their prime mid-card championship. It was originally the TNT title. The TNT Championship still exists, but if you were to compare right now the International and the TNT Championship, the International Championship has more prestige, in my opinion, than the TNT Championship. The TNT Championship had a lot of prestige in the beginning of its life cycle, but over the years, it's dipped down in quality, and nobody really cares about the TNT title scene. And it sucks because I like Adam Cole, but he's doing nothing for me as TNT champion. But the Continental title. The Continental title shouldn't have been a title that, it shouldn't have been a championship to begin with. It shouldn't have been a title to begin with. I'm sorry. The fact that AEW unveiled the Continental Championship for the winner of the Continental Classic made no sense. It made no sense. Of course, now I'm not hating on the concept of the Continental Classic, because if anything, I love the Continental Classic because it is a round robin tournament that is taking place on national television. We don't see tournaments like that on WWE programming. To me, things like the Continental Classic make AEW different. That's what makes them the alternative. But they got the stipulation all wrong. Instead of having the winner of the Continental Classic be granted a title shot, per se, maybe at Revolution, and you can do a long build towards that show, instead, the winner of the Continental Classic just won the Continental Championship. They won the Continental Championship. So they essentially won the title that will ultimately mean nothing in the long run. That is my problem right there. The Continental Championship shouldn't have been a championship to begin with. To me, the name the Unified Champion makes no sense. And it makes no sense for two reasons. Number one, you are causing confusion with your own audience. You're causing confusion with your own audience. Because if you're calling a championship, if you're calling hardware the AEW Unified Champion, a lot of people would assume, why are you calling this the Unified Championship if you have the world title right there? It makes no sense. It really doesn't make any sense. You're calling this the Unified title, but meanwhile, you have the World Championship right there. And the World Championship is your most important title that you have. So it just doesn't make any sense. Secondly, this doesn't make any sense because you're not only causing confusion with your own audience, but it exposes the fact that you have way too many titles at your arsenal. You have way too many belts. Way too many belts. That has been a major criticism. Not only on me on WWE, but a major criticism on AEW's end. And more so AEW than on WWE. WWE can at least get away with it because they are operating under a quote-unquote brand split, even though it means absolutely nothing. But, they have, on the SmackDown side, they have the WWE title, the tag team titles, the US title, the women's tag. They have a lot of championships on the SmackDown side, on the Raw side, and on the NXT side. And they also have titles for Evolve for those respective shows. But WWE still has way too many titles. Now, on the AEW end, they do not operate under a roster split. Nor they should not operate under a roster split. I know a lot of people on social media want AEW to have a brand split. Oh, AEW needs to do a brand split. That will fix their problems creatively. No, it will not. Why do I say this? AEW should not operate under a brand split. And the reason why I say this is because of the fact that, number one, if WWE cannot have the discipline to keep the roster separate, what makes you think AEW can? AEW cannot. And we've seen this already with AEW and Ring of Honor. AEW is essentially having a brand split technically with their main show, AEW, and another organization called Ring of Honor that nobody cares about, but you still have to pay $10 a month for. See my drift? And there's constant crossover. So really, what's the point? So again, AEW should not have a brand split. And why do you want AEW? Why do you want AEW to split the roster at a time when they're struggling to sell tickets for their weekly television? It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. So the root of AEW's problems should not result in a brand split. AEW is not the WWE. Okay? If WWE can't commit to a brand split, what makes you think AEW can commit to a brand split? Again, well, what makes you think that? It just doesn't make any sense. There should be no brand split. You want to know what puts asses in seats? Compelling storylines. And guess what? You don't need to have a roster split for a compelling story, guys. That's what sells. A roster split does not sell. Compelling storylines to sell you on their pay-per-views. That's what sells. You don't need a roster split to fix your problems. All you need is a compelling storyline that leads to great matches and great moments. That's what sells. You need good characters. You need all that. You need emotion. You need all that stuff. You need compelling stories. That's what sells. That's what sells here in the United States, guys. Not a brand split. A brand split does not sell. A brand split is just another burden on AEW's end, or at least on Tony Khan's end from a creative standpoint. It's a burden. I would not advocate for a brand split on AEW. Absolutely not. It makes no sense. So if you guys are advocating for a brand split in AEW, please stop watching the show. With all due respect. But yeah, when it comes to the Unified Championship, this is a terrible name. It is a terrible name because, again, number one, it causes confusion with the audience, and number two, it exposes the fact that there are way too many championships in AEW. Now, we have an update regarding the name of the Unified title, and this is actually also an update when it comes to Okada versus Omega. And I'm reading this from Fightful Select. Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega is official for All In with some big stakes. It was revealed on AEW Dynamite that the match would unify the AEW International and Continental title into the AEW Unified Championship. Fightful has been told that this match has been on the table as a tentative plan for almost a year, and that the firm plan was to get all in for all this, or to get all in for this match dating back to December before Kenny Omega's New Japan return. Fightful has not heard that the Intercontinental title was considered for a name, but all indications that were given to Fightful about the title is that it would be booked as and perceived as another top championship in AEW as opposed to a quote-unquote mid or upper mid-card title. The match announcement was credited internally as the reason AEW moved over 1,400 tickets in the last week. For those asking about the future of the Continental Classic as a result, the word is that it was here to stay. Obviously, it makes no sense. It's a fantastic concept. Why would AEW remove it? If for some reason there was any doubt, the injury on Dynamite was an angle. And of course, if you guys don't know what they're talking about, they are talking about this angle that took place right over here. If you guys don't know what happened on Dynamite, well, of course, Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega had their contract signing, and it was on a 4-hour block. So it was at the end of the second hour. They had their contract signing. Don Callis came out, and from behind, Okada attacked Kenny, and Kenny was getting stretchered out. And while he was getting stretchered out, he was already on top of the stretcher. Okada ended up hitting an elbow drop on the stomach of Kenny Omega. And if you guys don't know, Kenny Omega suffered from diverticulitis. He actually almost died from that, and they were playing into that. And Kenny Omega had somewhat of a fake blood pack in his mouth. And AEW showed Kenny Omega essentially spitting or puking out blood after he got elbow dropped on top of the stretcher by Kazuchika Okada. This was the scene that happened, and it was horrifying if you watched it on television. Horrifying. Viewer discretion is advised. But that is what Fightful is implying to when it comes to the injury, quote unquote, that Kenny Omega suffered. So when it comes to number one, I thought that was very gruesome on AEW's end to do that. I mean, they did not have to overdo that. I understood it was to sell, the match. And the match was already sold. I mean, the video package that AEW put on Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada was fantastic. Fantastic stuff on AEW's end. It was a great video package. Those are the types of video packages that AEW needs to put in order to sell their audience on maybe somebody coming from New Japan or somebody that maybe the core AEW audience does not know. Now, granted, the core AEW audience is purely the hardcore audience, but there are some fans who watch AEW that don't know a lot of the stuff that happened in New Japan. So AEW needs to do a better job at informing them, and this is definitely the way to do it. And that video package was fantastic. But in terms of that angle, AEW did not need to go that far, but I understood why they did it. Not to mention they had a shot of Don Callis and Okada just run backstage, very similar to the way that Don Callis ran with Kenny Omega after Kenny Omega initially won the AEW World title against Jon Moxley all the way back in the end of 2020. But when it comes to the Unified Championship, a very interesting quote when it comes to the Fightful report. They stated that, all indications that were given to Fightful about the title is that it would be booked as and perceived as another top championship in AEW as opposed to a quote-unquote mid or upper mid-card title. Now, that is very interesting. Why do I mention that one quote by Fightful in this report? Number one, it's the international title and the continental title, they're both essentially mid-card championships. They are mid-card championships. But they are unifying both titles. And a lot of people were creating the assumption that this was going to be their secondary world title. Now, if this report by Fightful and what they are saying is true, be prepared to possibly be disappointed with the outcome of Hangman Page and Jon Moxley. If they are unifying both the international and continental titles together for this unified title, and if what Fightful is saying is true, if what Fightful is saying is true, and that AEW is going to view this more as a top championship than a mid to upper card championship, this could possibly be their quote unquote other world championship, because Jon Moxley would eventually have this title for the rest of the year. Now, I do think Hangman Page will eventually win and beat Jon Moxley at All In. But again, take it with a grain of salt. If they are treating this title as more of a top championship in AEW, what does that tell you about the outcome of the main event between Jon Moxley and Hangman Page? Nobody wants Jon Moxley as the champion. Nobody wants Jon Moxley as the champion. The Death Rider storyline has run its course. It has been deemed as a failure, and rightfully so. But again, could this be a sign or the first hint of Jon Moxley being creatively but creatively written to win and beat Hangman Page and retain his world title at All In? If that happens, I'm telling you, man, the audience is going to be pissed. The audience is going to be upset. We're going to have to wait and see. But it's a very interesting point to know. Keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. When we're heading into All In, think about that one quote by Fightful. Think about it. Because it very well could happen, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, that concludes episode 8 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. We definitely talked about a lot of things right here on the show. Of course, we talked about Mariah May, Okada Omega, of course, John Cena and CM Punk, Jey Uso, Gunther. We talked about a lot of things on this show. A lot of things. But that concludes this edition of the WrestleHavoc podcast. I want to thank you guys all for joining me on this live stream. And of course, thank you guys all for joining me on, if you guys are watching on the WNN Facebook page, the WNN app, or on the WNN YouTube channel. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications. I mean, look out for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc channel, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the friggin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky DeRays, signing out. I'll see you guys all in the next show. Peace.